Hey guys, Christari here. Today I'm going to go through my top 100 prospects from the 2016 to 2020 drafts. So my challenge in this video was basically I set myself a period of 1 hour to go through who I think are really the top players through those drafts, and I'm ranking them from 1 to 100. So let's see how I go.
So to start us off, Jack Lukosius. So as you can see with the top 4 names on my list, they're all talls. And why I like talls early on is you've got a scarcity factor. There's not that many great key position players out there. But in recent years for me, there have been a few that have really stood out and have the scope to be among those really top players in the competition. Why I really like having the talls other than just the scarcity factor is if you've got them in place, well, you could have them in place for the next 15 years. And why that's advantageous is you don't really need to go drafting too many more if you've got those key pieces in place. So if I was to have on a list, let's say a Lukosius, Bolter, McDonald and Ugle-Hagan, I could have those 4 key position players, and beyond that as depth, I don't really need much. Maybe I could have 1 backup key forward, 1 backup key defender, maybe a medium tall defender who can play taller if required, maybe a similar story up forward. But really, if you've got that caliber of player and as long as they're durable, you don't really need a lot more. So the fact that they can really, I guess, not take up those list positions and really allow you to improve in other positions around the field, I think that's immensely valuable. And what's a bonus with a lot of these guys as well, and particularly with Lukosius and Bolter, they've got a great deal of flexibility, and even to a lesser extent, I could say the same of a McDonald. So, because if you wanted, he could really play up on a wing. He's got that sort of aerobic base to him where he could have that sort of scope. So, yeah, there's a lot of appeal with these guys, but Jack Lukosius, so he's someone where you can really play him anywhere, whether it's key defense, key forward, as a tall wing, you've got a great deal of options there. So what I love about Lukosius is, for me, he's already the best kick in the competition. So what's special about his kicking? So not only does he have the penetration, but he's got the precision kick, and he's someone where he sees the play unfold before it happens. So when he kicks it, and he knows right away exactly when and where it's going to land, and he knows who's going to be there in that moment. And he does that in a way that I've never seen of any other footballer really in my many years of watching at any level. So that's what's special with Lukosius, and being a second year, last year was his second year, and he was already second in the competition for meters gained during the regular season. So doing that as a tall at such a young age is really remarkable. So he's a fantastic player. If he stays in defence, he'll be a big time asset, and look, there's still viability behind that. He's got the scope to be a great intercept mark. I think that's something he'll build into his game more so over time. And I think also he could be someone where you could really allow him to slip forward, and whether it's him taking marks at around that 50-metre mark or even a bit outside of there and giving that delivery kick inside 50. So you've got a lot of options there, but then if you use him as a forward on a wing, he could be that 200 mark a year plus sort of player. And again, with his kicking, well, he's just going to do a lot of damage. And really, again, as I was saying before, hit those inside 50 targets. So with all those dynamics in play, and with a Lukosius being someone where he's not necessarily he doesn't make you too tall because he's got that aerobic base. He covers the ground like absolute mad. So yeah, he gives you a lot of options. So he's the player ultimately that I'd be starting a team with. But next up, I'd go with a Noah Bolter as my number 2 guy. So, and with a Bolter, he's much more than a key defender. And I might be the only person in the country that felt this way, but I actually felt insulted for the guy when he was compared to Alex Rance. And that might sound like hyperbole, but he's just got such a unique game. So for me, like a Rance, obviously great shutdown player, could intercept. He won his one-on-ones, so there's a lot of great things there. But with a Bolter, there's just something different, and there's just a real X factor to him. So as a key defender, well, he'll win his one-on-ones, compete in the air, do all those sorts of things, but then he can really bolt with the ball, where he's just got that acceleration like you really don't see, and I think he's going to show that more and more. So, and then you've obviously got the intercepting, you've got those components, you've got the penetrating kick that goes your 55, 60 So I'd say probably a solid 60 metres. He could almost go out to 65 if he really wanted to launch. But you've got those weapons, but there's also a bit of untapped versatility, a bit like a Lukosius, that we haven't necessarily seen with Bolter yet. So he had a moment in one of his finals last year where he got sort of pushed forward and he was full forward leading out the goal square. Just the separation he created on the lead was just insane. So having those sort of tools in his kit's phenomenal. And there's also something that a lot of AFL fans won't have seen with a Bolter, where you could actually put him in the centre square at a centre bounce as one of your inside midfielders, and he can actually win the ground balls and explode out of stoppages. So you've got all those options. You can play him as a relieving ruck. You can play those ruck minutes and be competitive. So yeah, I'm really seeing a lot there with a Noah Bolter as well. So being able to impact in so many different positions and having all that flexibility to his game, to me, that's just a huge asset. So he'd be the next guy I'd next most want on my team. And this is really looking at, I guess, how good I think they can be over their career, and also, to me, I guess, how desirable of a player they would be if I was starting a team and wanted them on my list for really the duration of their career, you could say. And then you've got a Logan McDonald. So for me, he's a 1A over a Jamara, who now for me is more of a 1B. But I've just really got a great deal of conviction about him as a key forward, and I think he can become the best key forward in the competition. So he's someone where, looking at what his jump from the Waffle Colts in 2019 to last year 2020 at Waffle League level, his numbers across the board actually improved, and that's absolutely staggering, going from playing against kids to playing against men and actually taking that next step and playing a higher quality of football. So more goals, more marks, more disposals per game. So doing all those things on a higher level. And what was unique with the McDonald is that he wasn't monstering guys. He's not that sort of big, strong sort of fella. He's actually still pretty thin and still physically developing. So you've still got that element of upside, but you've got that rate of improvement. So what was great with him last year is just his ground level craft. You've got as one of those weapons, but then he's that really high level endurance athlete where he covers a lot of the ground. And then also you've got his kick as well. So his set shot goal kicking, conversion in front of goal, he's got all those elements to him. And his marking is going to keep getting stronger and stronger. And as he physically sort of puts on that size, I think he'll be even more of a marking threat. And looking at what he's doing already for Sydney, seeing his round 1 performance, seeing his Amy match, he's a best 22 player already, and already someone you can rely on to be that, I'd even probably say, a 1 to 2 goal a game sort of guy already. So off to a great start, and I look forward to keep seeing his development. But for me, he'd be my highest conviction key forward. But then again, you've got a Lukosius and Bolter who, if they play forward, they bring different dynamics and they could be just as good. But I like those guys more for their versatility and all the options they really give you. Next up, so Jamara. So although Jamara, I would have liked to have seen round 1 and probably have been that more immediate guy, just the reality with him is, well, there wasn't any football to play last year in Victoria, so his development's probably a little further back than I was perhaps hoping. But with that said, I still think he's going to be absolutely phenomenal, and what he does inside 50 as that option, I think it's second to none. So I think as that, I guess, marking option inside 50, I think there's really no one that will really touch him or be in that category. So just the sheer dominance in the air, where as soon as he launches, there's no way to stop him. So that's the special sauce there, but then he's still got the ground level craft. He'll create separation on the lead, so he still does those other sort of things you want from a key forward, but there's still a lot of polishing up with his game required. So he needs to start impacting games more up the field, kicking conversion in front of goal, that needs to improve. And the big thing for him as well is his hands overhead. So he just drops too many marks that he should be taking, particularly when he's in prime position, and really he should be taking it 10 times out of 10. So in particular, if he gets that marking component right, well then absolutely he'll validate where I've got him listed on this list. So big calls with guys like obviously Logan and Jamara really being in their first season. It's really the start of their journey, but with that said, I believe in them both very much as talents, and I think they can possibly validate where I've got them in the future. So number 5, Matt Rowell. So perhaps a bit of a risk given the injuries that he's had, but looking at his really, I guess, first 4 games last year, you could say, well, it's pretty clear that he's deserving based on that sort of quality, assuming he keeps improving upon that. And I'm sure he will. It's just a case of you just hope he doesn't, I guess, have any more injuries. So, but yeah, looks like a future captain, future Brownlow medalist. He's just going to be one of those absolute superstar midfielders. My query with him, I guess, is will he ever become that best in competition level player? And for me, possibly not. And the reason for that being, he's really that, I guess, 180, maybe slightly sub 180 type mids. So given that, I'm not seeing him necessarily having that Dustin Martin sort of X factor where I don't think necessarily he'll ever be able to go forward of centre and really dominate you. So with that in mind, I think that's probably the slight shortcoming that we'll find with his game. But in terms of pure midfield craft, I think that can be the best in the competition. And seeing how advanced the contested side of his game is in particular already, that's what really catches my eye. But then he does all those little things as well, blocking for teammates, just repeat leads. So there's a lot of sort of small little things that he really just screams sort of 200 plus gamer already, even though he's only really played those 4 games, injury affected 5th game last year, and then obviously hurt sort of start of the game sort of this year in game 1. But yeah, so I'm really high on Matt Rowell as a talent, and yeah, I'm still very confident. But would I take him over any of those 4 talls? For me, no. I don't quite see him as that transcendent level player, but I think he's going to be fantastic, obviously. Next up, so Bailey Smith. So this might be higher than some other people might have him, but for me, I give him the slight edge over a Sam Walsh. But reason being, he's got more acceleration. For me, is the better kick, and I also think he's got the scope to be the better contested ball winner. Just having that additional size and strength in the contest. Just seeing, comparing what they did as juniors. As long as Bailey Smith gets those midfield minutes, and then I think he's probably ever so slightly that guy. But in saying that, with a Sam Walsh, look, he's terrific. He's obviously got that endurance base as a Smith does, so you've got that. But then also in his own right, he's a fantastic contested ball winner. Again, do these guys a bit like a Rowell necessarily have those weapons forward of centre as per your Dusties, your Dangers from, I guess, this current generation that are sort of nearing the end of their time? Possibly not. So that sort of holds them off necessarily being in that ultra high-end category. But in saying that, look, all 3 of them should be your elite midfielders, and absolutely they're sort of your number 1 option mids. So, and possibly each could be future captains. So they've got that sort of upside to them with their games. So yeah, very comfortable with that top 7. And then next up, we've got Max and Ben King. So little separation between the two. With Max, I slightly feel that is the better option closer to goal. Whereas Ben, maybe he's got a touch more versatility up the ground and as a key defender. But ultimately, I think they're both going to remain those, I guess, centrepiece key forwards, number 1 options inside 50. So they'll both be great for the Saints and Gold Coast respectively. Why I have them lower than a Jamara? For me, both they're obviously, as I was saying, dominant inside 50 targets, and they've also, to their credit, got ground level craft for guys their height, and that's what makes them great. When you've got the combo of both, that's fantastic. And also, they're better kicks than a Jamara, and I'd say even more solid marks. But with a Jamara, there's just a few intangibles that are on a level that just make me think he can be dominant on yet another level compared to those guys. So with a Jamara, what I'm seeing is just simply what he can do aerially. You just can't stop that. You're really going to have almost team defences built to try and stop him doing what he does. And I guess you could say possibly similar in the future could be possible with the King boys, but probably not quite to the same extent as a Jamara. I think he's really going to cause teams headaches once he gets up and going and he's had that sort of season or 2 under his belt at AFL levels. So but yeah, personal preference sort of thing. There'll be some that might rate King higher than a Jamara, or either of the Kings, or maybe both. But yeah, for me, I'm still a Jamara fan slightly over those 2. But obviously, you'd love any of these guys. If you had the Kings as a number 1 option inside 50, well, you're set for the next 15 years in that regard. And it's just about finding a decent number 2 option, basically. Next up, I'm lacking a Jai Simpkins. So he was playing great football last year. I'm expecting continued improvement this year. what I like with a Simkin is you've really had that rate of improvement over time, and really having that breakout year last year, I'm intrigued as to whether he can really continue building upon that. But assuming he does, then he's got that chance to validate my position for him here. So, and similar story with the Zach Butters. So, he's had a few years in the system now, and really every year he's really stepped up. And really looking at what he was as a junior, and then looking at first year in the AFL took a big step, second year in the AFL took a big step. So with Butters, I'm just seeing that upward growth trajectory of improvement. So, and when you've got that, well, you could be talking about really a fantastic player going forward. So, and with the Simkin and Butters, I could have them in either order. I think they're both fantastic. Maybe I could even have a Butters ahead of a Simkin, given a bit younger, but Simkin I'll go slightly ahead at this stage, just given he's got that more established midfield game in particular. So that's the edge there, but Butters could catch him and pass him. So moving on from there, Tom Green. So I could possibly have him ahead of a Simkin or Butters. That's something that I think for me is probably in that conversation where maybe he could. His game is probably a bit more, I guess, defined from the perspective that he's obviously that great contested ball inside, but in terms of what he does, I think he can become the best in the competition at what he does. So as that pure stoppage specialist, I don't think we're necessarily going to have any better than Tom Green. And for me, going through the junior ranks, Green is the best I've ever seen at those components, being that first possession winner, having that contested side to his game. So that's something I really look forward to seeing grow for him at GWS, and I'm excited hopefully to see him not only play every week but really get substantial inside midfield minutes, because if that does occur, then I think he can be an absolute monster, even maybe a Josh Kennedy or a Patrick Cripps plus almost in some regards, in that pure sort of, I guess, inside craft. So I think he'll be really sensational. So next up I've got Aaron Norton. So he's someone where, look, he had his inconsistencies last year, and it's more, I guess, I'm backing him to develop into the player that I hope he will. So, obviously had a terrific start to his career. He's an elite endurance beast. Obviously, he's an incredible marking threat. Kicking could be better, but there's still a lot there to like. With a Norton, look, you've got the option either to play him as a key forward or as a key defender, and in either position he can be great. If he's staying forward, well, if you've got Jamara and Norton, that can be the best 1-2 punch in the AFL. So that's pretty exciting for Dogs fans. And then conversely, if you put him in defence, well, I think he could possibly be even better as a key defender. That's where he played quite a bit of his junior footy, or that junior footy that I was watching at least, and just such a natural reader of it. He'd be in sensational intercept marks. So if the key forward craft doesn't necessarily work out for him, well, I would, I guess, stick him back and keep him back, because I think he could be an absolute monster of a key defender and really a top, I'd say 1 to 3 standard in the competition key defender. Certainly top 5, so he's really got that sort of game to him. But as a key forward, look, he could be in that top 5 sort of mix, so it's really weighing up what you'd prefer with him. But obviously sensational, you'd love him on your list. Nick Blakey. So, sort of a tall wing, has the skills, you can play him anywhere, that's the cool thing with him. So he could be a key forward if you wanted to, you can put him as a key back. But yeah, gives Sydney a great deal of options, and yeah, having that flexibility as that taller player is really valuable, because it means you're not really too tall. You can actually utilise more of those taller players as part of your best 22, and it just gives you a different dynamic that can make it quite hard to match up on as a team. So I think Blakey can be an absolute monster for Sydney, and here's another where I just look forward to seeing that year-on-year growth. But for me, comparing him, say, to the Kings, I do see him quite a bit behind that. He's not yet at that level, but I really do like the flexibility that he offers. So he's not a Lukosius, but he's at least sort of something in that sort of nearing that vicinity, I suppose. But yeah, different positions, but yeah, definitely has game. Charlie Ballard. So he's a butcher of a kick, but sensational mark, sensational intercept mark. He can win his one-on-ones. So I really love him as a key defender, and he's one of those first key defenders that I'd want on my team. So, and Sam Taylor, he's another. So, missed last year for health issues, but I think he'll really come back strong this year and almost be that All-Australian contender from this year. So, as with a Ballard, they're interchangeable. Really, with any of these guys, I could have any of these guys in any order. I really like all of them. And they could almost push ahead of some of these midfielders potentially. So, and that was just quickly slotting them into the order. Not too much thought went into that, but basically they're this high on the list because they deserve to be. So, and with a Taylor, look, he's going to be strong one-on-one, he'll get stops, but he also intercepts. So he's got all those components to him. So yeah, I think he's really going to be great for GWS for quite a long time. And then Oscar Allen. So I think this year is probably his breakout year. I think he can really surpass your Darlings and your Kennedys and really be that number one option. So great as a key forward, has flexibility and versatility. So again, has a lot of those components that are really valuable to a team. So yeah, I think his stocks are really going to keep rising. And again, here's another. You could have him anywhere in this sort of range and you'd feel pretty comfortable with it, honestly. So next up, Hugh McCluggage. So in terms of outside players, he's got the endurance, he's got the skills. He can win enough of his own balls. So yeah, he absolutely deserves to be here. So yeah, really like his game and have for a long time. And then you've got Andy McGrath. So had a great round one, obviously, and is one of those guys where whether it's midfield, inside, outside, you can have him running off half back. You can even have him shutting down a defender or a forward on the other team. So gives you a great deal of options. And then a Tim Taranto. So all these guys, funnily enough, same draft. You've got a pick 1, a pick 2, a pick 3. They all deserve to be in that same conversation together. They're all high-quality footballers. With a Taranto, he's the most prolific ball winner and tackler of the group. He's got that most advanced inside game. And with him, I guess the key will be seeing him push forward more, be more of that goal-kicking threat that he was in the junior ranks and really make a bit more, find more of those inside 50 targets because he's got all those components to his game. It's just about showing it at AFL level now, beyond just obviously having that, I guess, midfield craft. So yeah, I look forward to seeing that grow, and if it does, well, yeah, we might see a bit of an order change in this group, but you could have any of these guys in any order. Again, it was really just about having them in that region, I suppose, in this list that they should be, given I had such a limited time period to put this group together. From there, we've got an Adam Chera, so really like him. He can play anywhere. So he's had success in defence, on a wing. He's great through the midfield, prolific ball winner. So, but then having those skills, fantastic. You can put him forward as well. That's something that as a junior he did quite a bit more, and we haven't necessarily seen him have the chance at AFL level, but that's something where he can kick his goals, be a bit of a target. So yeah, there's a lot to his game. And I'd say the same of Luke Davies-Uniacke. So you could have any of these guys in anywhere in this order and you'd feel pretty happy. So with an LDU, well, you've got obviously the strong contested side of his game. He's got that burst of speed out of stoppages. And he's someone where I'd like to see him perhaps develop more of that forward craft and maybe be more of that marking option, maybe even develop that almost Dusty style, danger style sort of forward ability, where he has actually shown as a junior out of the goal square he can be a factor. So I'm really interested to see if he can develop that at AFL level. But LDU, he's one of the breakout players for this year. I think he's set to really have a big 2021. So thoroughly deserves to be on this list. Hasn't necessarily in past years shown all that much. Last year was sort of a breakout year where he really established himself as a very good AFL midfielder. And I think this year he becomes really one of those elite midfielders. So I'm interested really to see how his game progresses and can he develop that midfield craft, because if he does, that forward craft, and if he does, well, he could even break into the top 10 on this list. He's got that sort of ability. So, but I'll pump the brakes given he was a slow starter, but yeah, I think he could really move up quite considerably on this list. And in thinking about it now, I could almost go these guys ahead of these guys, but it's really open. There's not much separation with any of these sort of players. Jared Berry, he's been a factor for Brisbane for a number of years now, and yeah, sensational. So looks great on the outside. You could have him running off half back, half forward if you want. He can play through as an inside mid if you want. So gives you a lot of options. But yeah, just a really good footballer and really someone you want on your team. Damaging. There's just a lot there. So yeah, would love him on my team, as with all these guys. Hunter Clark, in years past you've seen him running off half-back. This year I think he makes the stride to become a genuine inside mid. So he'll still have his runs off half-back, I'm sure. But as a junior, he was a high-level accumulator and ball winner. So I think we'll see more of that. And if you have that with the burst out of stoppages, well, I think he's really going to be a factor in the Saints midfield. And really, he with Steele, I think they can be the top two mids. I think even a Hunter Clark can be better than a Brad Crouch for mine. So, yeah, really watch his name as a midfielder. I think he's going to be sensational. And then we've got an Isaac Rankin. So, really like his game as a forward. Last year I was announcing, this guy should be the rising star. And I think he's already on that sort of precipice of being that top 10 in the competition, sort of, I guess, general forward, small forward. It's going to be interesting to see how he develops this year, but he can really open a game up. So both, not only him being that, I guess, goal-kicking threat, but what's really unique with Rankin, and not many players can do this on his level, but he's a real playmaker. He sets up teammates, plays a really unselfish game, hits all those inside 50 targets, has that creativity to him. But then what you probably haven't seen yet at AFL level, but he can very much do this, he can go through the midfield and win his own ball, really be a factor and impact games through there too. Obviously got the skills out there. So yeah, there's really a lot of untapped potential with a Rankin, and I look forward to seeing how he, I guess, keeps growing that and progressing those components to his game, because he's a special footballer. So yeah, hopefully he gets a clean run with injury and we keep seeing that growth, because he's going to be really fun to watch for a long time. Rosie, he's really good anywhere almost. Whether you've got him forward, well, he'll hit the scoreboard, provide pressure. He's going to do a lot of things there. But then you can play him off halfback, provide some run, just really sort of mix well in there. You could even in the future possibly put him through the midfield. It'll be interesting to see if he develops that contested side to his game on that level, where he can do that, but you could have him on the wing. So you've just got a lot of options, but basically Rosie just really impacts games heavily. So yeah, he's definitely a good one, and one that you'd want very soon on this sort of draft. Noah Anderson, I think, is going to take another step this year. Good midfielder, you can play him inside, outside, you can put him forward if you want, so gives you a lot of options. Will Phillips, look, he has dropped down, I guess, where I would have rated him compared to where I rated him, say, a few months ago, or 12 months ago for that matter. But for me, he still has to be really high, where what he was doing in 2019, it was almost Matt Rowell stuff at the same age. So Rowell, obviously, in his draft year, hit another level. Phillips, well, there wasn't really a draft year in Victoria last year. So he missed out on that opportunity last year to develop, but I think he's really going to be a sensational midfielder. One possible query is he an early bloomer? Look, he's been good from a young age, so you've got that. But on the other side of things, well, he's a professional. He'll keep working and improving his craft. So I think he's going to really be a high-level midfielder. Unlike a few of the others, perhaps doesn't have that forward craft or weapons in other positions. So I think he will remain that sort of pure mid. And I think that's why you're not really seeing him yet for North Melbourne, where North Melbourne, despite sort of being a weak team, I guess you could say, they've actually got a good number of really good midfielders. So that's sort of their dilemma there, and how do you sort of accommodate them all into one team ultimately. So that'll be interesting to see if and when he's introduced this year. So Caleb Sarong, rising star last year, deserved it. Great as a midfielder. What we're going to see in the future, I believe, will be more forward craft too. He's really got that side, but I think first Fremantle just want to get his midfield craft up to an extremely high level. Has those contested components, has all that, but as a forward he can actually be a leaping, marking target, hits the scoreboards, so there's still a bit that I guess people haven't seen yet that's still there to be excited about. So, but being a shorter player, look, does he have the upside of a few others? Possibly not, but yeah, certainly fantastic in year one, and I expect continued growth in his game. Jordan Ridley, we wouldn't have been expecting anything like this 12 months ago, but he obviously had a BNF level year last year, and I think he's going to probably be taking a lot of the kickouts for Essendon, and he's going to be a big factor for a long time. Just being that intercept marking threat, good ball user, he's going to be a real fixture down there for Essendon and a really valuable player. So, if you want that interceptor, that really good general defender who can play taller, I'd really like to have Ridley on my team. And same with the Luke Ryans. So, obviously has that intercepting side. He can shut down an opponent. He can play taller. So, you've just got a lot of options there. He just plays a really high quality sort of standard of footy. Nick Caulfield, again, I'm putting a few of the general defenders together here, but you've got a really high level interceptor, really came into his own last year, a bit like a Ridley. But he's someone where he's class personified, has the evasion, has the skills. There's a lot of game there. Andrew Brayshaw, maybe some might have him a bit higher than I do. For me, there are a few deficiencies that hold him back a little from being higher on this list. Skills can let him down sometimes, possibly lacks a bit of X factor. He's really a sole sort of inside mid, so he's just a single position player, I guess, but obviously phenomenal accumulator, ball winner, has the contested side, so he's going to be prominent in Fremantle's midfield for a long time. But is he better than Adam Chera? For me, no. I believe Chera's the better midfielder. Just having those extra components, extra versatility and flexibility, it's easier to fit someone like him into a good team compared to a Brayshaw where you're really locking him into that one role. So that's the benefit of, I guess, having flexibility there and having, I guess, better skills. Next up on the list, we've got Tom Stewart. So, given he's a mature age player, look, he had to be a bit lower on the list, just thinking about what's his career going to be over the course of time. But obviously, he's one of the most advanced and best players today on this list. So, if not, really well up there as those very top few. So tall defender, intercepts, good ball user, beats his opponent every week. Fantastic. You want him on your team. So I like him where he is. Rowan Marshall, for me, is a top 3-4 caliber sort of ruckman in the competition. Obviously, you've got Gawn and Grundy. You've got Nick Nat when he's flying is great. But for me, from there, probably you'd have Marshall, or at least I would. So sharing the ruck duties with Paddy Ryder, his numbers were a bit down last year, but fantastic ruckman, really competitive, just like his game. But again, he is a mature ager, he is a few years older than a lot of his peers, so given that, I can't really justify having him any higher on this list. Tim Kelly, again, mature ager, but one of the most advanced, best players on this list today, based on current performance. So obviously fantastic midfielder. You've all seen him play, no doubt. Has a contested side, kills you with how he uses the balls, so it's a scoreboard, does it all. So really good player. You'd love to have him. Liam Ryan, again, I'm going with a mature age flavour, I suppose. But yeah, great forward, obviously. Aerial assault, he's basically a shorter Jamara almost, so expect Jamara to be sort of a taller Liam Ryan almost, so that'll be a bit of fun for people. But yeah, with a Ryan, aerial assault, strong mark, provides the pressure, hits the scoreboard, just high impact per possession. So you'd love to have him on your team, one of the best general forwards in the competition, it's fair to say. But being mature age, look, you can't have him too high, because there's others that are sure over time, assuming a longer career for them, to pass him by. So from there, Sam Draper. So possibly you could say a risk to have him this high as a ruckman who really only last year started to get a taste for things. And look, he does have an injury history behind him, so that's one of my reservations there as well. But look, assuming he has a reasonably healthy career, what I've liked with a Draper is that year-on-year upward trajectory. So he's someone I'd really love to have as a ruckman. If I was starting a team, he'd be one of those first few that I'd really be looking at. And still being that younger player, he's still got enormous scope to grow, and I think he's going to take more steps this year. So, definitely keep watching Sam Draper. He's one of those, I guess, good young Essendon players who should have quite a lot of scope to grow. Elijah Hollands, obviously missed last year, hurt. He's going to take some while to be introduced for Gold Coast, but he's an impact player. So whether you've got him forward, wing, midfield, he just really hurts you in a number of positions. So Really great run and carry player, but really hurts you by foot as well. But then he also finds enough of the ball, can win his own ball enough. So, I think he's really going to be a good player for Gold Coast for a long time. So, yeah, I feel confident having him inside my top 40 at this stage. And then Riley Thilthorpe. So, some might have him higher. If they do, fair enough. I can understand that. But for me, he is below a lot of those, I guess, other really top-end key forwards. And for me, it's just a case of he's more physically developed. So maybe he doesn't quite have that upside to come, but he has shown a consistent rate of improvement. So I still do think for quite a few years yet he still will improve. But obviously, fantastic key forward, fantastic through the ruck. He's played Sandford League footy for a couple of years now. So so he's ready to go. And whenever Adelaide introduce him, I think he's going to play pretty reasonable footy. So he's definitely one I look forward to seeing. Then I've got with some, I guess, general defenders here. And I've really, again, sort of clumped a few by position together. So, Lachie Jones, look, he's a competitor, a contested bull. He has scope in the future to push through the midfield and really be sort of that influential player through there. Wins a high percentage contested, but then has the burst of speed, can do some damage by foot, has the penetration there. So, yeah, he's got a lot of tools there, but in the meantime, once he's introduced into defence for Port Adelaide, well, he's going to win in his one-on-ones. He's obviously got a cannon of a kick on him. He'll provide a little bit of runs, so I think he'll play really good footy there too. Very confident on Lachie Jones. He's an incredibly high probability of career guy who's year one, round one ready. So, but unfortunately, Port Adelaide are just that strong. Braden Campbell, if he was used as a forward or mid, he'd be way down this list. Maybe even, I don't even know if he'd necessarily be on it, but in defence, I really like him. So for me, he's a top 3 kick in the comp already, and we've only seen him 1 week. But I think he'll be absolutely terrific by foot. He's got that Daniel Rich style kick, but it's even better. So that's something to look forward to. But then on top of that, he's got that burst of speed. So he's really got a lot of offensive weapons. So it'll be interesting to see how quickly he cottons on to how to play in defence, but I think he's going to be great for Sydney for a long time. Hayden Young, he's someone who I guess you can rely on beating his opponent every week, but then he's one of those, again, he could possibly be a top 5 kick in the comp by the end of the year out of defence. So he should be taking the kick-outs for Freo, and really like his game. Lachie Ash, I could have had these guys in any order. Lachie Ash, still a good kick, but he's more someone who provides a lot more run and carry. That's more part of his game than, say, with Hayden Young as an example. So he'll hurt teams more that way. So, just, again, another of those where you just look forward to seeing his growth and development, because I think he'll be a good piece for a long time. Tim English, his position is hard to place, honestly. As a ruckman, he's deficient as a tap ruckman. Whenever there's a boundary throw in, he always seems to be second to the ball. He just doesn't have any awareness of where the ball's going to drop. Don't like him at centre bounces either, but around the ground for a ruckman, well, he's absolutely sensational. One of the absolute best, could even be in contention to be that best in those sorts of regards. So it's really, you have to understand what he is, what he can do, what he can't do. If I had him, I'd be saying, you can be a tall wing for me, and you can be that relieving ruck. So let's say I had as an example Sam Draper as my number 1 ruck. He would be rucking for, let's say, at 80% of the minutes, and then I'd have a Tim English come in as that relieving guy for those 20 minutes in the ruck. And then when Draper's back on the field, English can just retreat back to the wing and really just cover a lot of ground, be that marking factor where he can go behind the ball, intercept, fantastic. He can push forward, provide that contested marking, target take quite a few, hit the scoreboard. So they're the sort of things more so within English that I would be looking at. And his skills are good, but his ground coverage is phenomenal. If you look at, I guess, how much ground he covered last year in particular, he could really be that genuine tall wing. I guess it really depends by position on what you look for, but I think really, I guess the advantages, for me at least, outweigh the disadvantages of using him in that sort of position and that sort of role. Shea Bolton, high impact per possession, great at stoppages, just really impacts games, particularly when he gets the ball in his hands. But to be higher on this list, look, he'll need to start finding more of the footies. So still for me, probably a bit low production to be able to justify necessarily having him higher than I do, but in saying that, obviously I really like him as a talent to have him this high on my list. So just with the way he impacts games, you can put him forward, he'll have an impact, so it just gives you a lot of options. But yeah, really like Bolton's game. From there, Luke Jackson. I don't like Jackson as a forward, and it's a really awkward partnership seeing both he and Gawn on the same team. So obviously Jackson's there to be that, I guess, eventual successor, and it also in his early years does protect his body if he's playing forward. But the problem is, as a key forward, he looks lost. It's just not his position. So so it'll be a bit hard watching early days for Melbourne, but eventually when he can take over the ruck duties, look, I think Luke Jackson's going to be a good ruckman. High leaper, he'll get his hands to the ball, he can direct it down. He's competitive through there, good tackler, so he can win a bit of his own ball. He is on that shorter side for a ruckman, but you don't have to be super tall. You can win through the ruck in different ways. So you can be a Mumford, where you can be a 196-ish, and you can be that physical monster, and it doesn't matter. Whereas Jackson is more that sort of leaper, so that's fine. I think he'll be more than adequate through the ruck, if not one of the better ruckmen in the comp, once fully established and developed. Denver Granger Barras. Look, I'm okay with having him here. Maybe I could have him a bit lower, but ultimately I think he develops. So I'm betting on him sort of physically developing, becoming, I guess, that really competitive player that he looks like he'll become. So, just someone where very competitive in the air, just tries to beat his opponent every week, but then really natural reader of the ball, interceptor. So there's a lot that I like there with his game. So he definitely deserves to be on this list. Dan Houston, through the midfield he didn't look great last year, but seeing him in defence after that, look, he sold me on him. So great kick, intercepts, he's just a really good general defender. So someone I'd definitely be wanting on my team. Liam Baker, look, slow starter, he's those few years older also, so I did keep that in mind. But obviously last year really took off and established himself as a really reliable and good general defender for Richmond. So like his game, have respect, deserves to be in that 50. Patrick Lipinski, I think this year he could, although the midfield minutes are going to be hard to come by, he's someone where he can be an impact player both through the midfield and up forward. And if I was to have given myself a bit longer on this list, he's almost someone I'd be tempted to move up a little bit. I really like his game, and seeing what he did through the Amy match really sort of showed me that, he could be both a midfielder but then as a forward impact games too. So, and he was already doing that a little bit last year, but I think he's still got quite a bit of growth in his game, and I think he's going to be terrific for a long time. Will Day, look, he looks like one of Hawthorn's clear top young players. Really surprised me last year seeing how good he was, because he wasn't someone I really rated all that highly on my draft board, certainly not compared to where he was drafted. And he was someone where through the under-18s, he's someone where I could watch the whole game, take notes constantly through the games, and barely notice him. So he's someone where he just really fits into a team. He won't make any skill errors, makes sound decisions with ball in hands. So, and that's sort of what's carried over to AFL level, where you don't always necessarily notice him, but you never notice him doing anything bad either. So, but skill's good. I think is going to keep growing and improving as a footballer for Hawthorn. It'll be interesting if ever he can develop midfield craft, but if not, well, he's certainly great in defence and sort of on the outside. So, Brian Myers, really good small forward, like him. Deserves to be here. I think he's one of those better young sort of small forwards. Hits the scoreboard, can provide a bit of pressure, just a really lively type. So there's always room for those. James Warple. So he's won a B and F for Hawthorn. Hawthorn fans will say you should have him higher, but I'm not convinced he necessarily has as much scope to improve as people think. So I'm always looking at growth trajectories of players, and with a Warple, look, at 15, 16, he was already built like a man. He really was very, very physically strong. So given that, I'm not necessarily sure he improves all that dramatically. In joining Hawthorn, what did improve a great deal was his kick. His kick prior to joining Hawthorn, there was quite a great deal of inconsistency, but to his credit and to Hawthorn's credit, he's really cleaned that up. But yeah, obviously terrific midfielder, but can he impact in other positions? For me, no. Is he going to necessarily be an All-Australian calibre midfielder? I don't think he will. So given that, I have him where I do, but I think obviously for Hawthorn is could be a number 1 to 3 option, I suppose, through the midfield, and someone you obviously want through there, but I don't think is necessarily going to be that elite midfielder that I think a lot of Hawthorn fans assume he will be. So, but personal opinion, we'll have to wait and see. He could prove me wrong, but I always do look at, well, how physically developed are they and what's their rate of improvement? And for a Warple, I'm not necessarily sure he can improve all that much on where he was at, I guess, in 2019. Willem Drew, bit of a risk having him in there. There might be some lack of clarity still at this point whether he's part of Port Adelaide's best 22, but for me, he's in there. And in terms of like sheer aggression and aggressiveness, whether it's tackling, whether it's winning his own ball, Drew is one of the hardest, if not the hardest I've ever seen. So that includes guys, whether it's Jack Viney, you can name them all day. I think Willem Drew is right there with any of them. So, and looking at his preseason match, led Port Adelaide for contested possessions, tackles, clearances. So he's really got that inside game, but the key with him is using him on the inside. I think if you do that, you're really going to get a lot out of him. And he moves well too. Good height. There's a lot to like. I like his game. Have for a long time. And it's just about unlocking him and using him more through the midfield, basically. Perryman, breakout year last year. He gives you options. You can use him half-back, wing. Looks great. You can play him inside. Although for GWS, it's going to be hard to come across those opportunities. But yeah, obviously he's fantastic. I could possibly have him higher. He's in the conversation with a lot of those guys, but yeah, I like him roughly where he is here. I think he justifies that top, say, 60 spot. Jack Bowes, again, with he and a few of these next guys, it's a large conversation where you could argue any of them could be higher. But yeah, with a Bowes, slowish start to his career, but last year really established himself in defence and looks terrific back there. Intercepts, used the ball solidly. I think last weekend he was even 100% efficiency on some very high number of disposals. So yeah, he's a good piece, needless to say. Wilkie, good interceptor, does everything well. There's some talk even there's some speculation maybe he's that All-Australian calibre player this year. Interesting if he can make that step to be that level of player, but obviously a very good general defender and another that you'd really like to have on your team. Dersma, really good on the outside, provides run, good kick, finds a lot of it. Contested side could be better, but again, I'm pretty satisfied having him here. And with the way the game's going, where it's becoming more of an outside game, a few less stoppages, I think it probably favours guys like Dersma and makes them a bit more relevant than they may have been. But he's been fantastic for a number of years. From year one, he's been really a fantastic piece. So, yeah, obviously very good. Caldwell, I think he has a breakout year for Essendon. It was just about giving him those, I guess, consistent midfield opportunities. With GWS, look, they had a loaded midfield, so it was hard to feature him, but Essendon do really have the capability to feature him, so with that opportunity, I think that's really going to help him. Here I've bunched a few ruckmen together. There's no meaningful separation here. But Tom Fullerton, I really wanted to give credit to. So a basketball convert, really developed meaningfully, and this year I think he could possibly establish himself as a best 22 player. I would personally pick him over a McStay, but he's got that, I guess, month or so to, I guess, give Brisbane that preview of what he can do, and maybe he holds his spot, maybe he just gets pushed out. We'll have to wait and see, but Fullerton I'd like eventually to see through the ruck, so we'll see if that transition ever transpires, but seeing him, I guess, develop forward craft as well is really promising. And look, he's got the ground level craft, he's good overhead, really has a lot of awareness in traffic, so there's really a lot of good signs there that suggest Fullerton is highly developable. So yeah, I think he's one of those guys that people won't necessarily rate now, but give it a few years and I think people are going to realise how good he is. Laddams, look, he's stuck behind Lysette, but if he was allowed to be that number one ruckman, look, he's shown that he's pretty good when he gets those opportunities. So, he's developed quite considerably since he was a junior as well. So, look, like his game, I'd be pretty comfortable if I had him as my number one ruck. I think he's got enough capabilities to play that sort of role. Sean Darcy, the query with him, and look, he was great in his first year, and we've had that sort of each year on year has been pretty strong, but we haven't seen that improvement, which has been what's really frustrated me. So seeing him as a junior, he wasn't dominant as a junior, but then he came in at AFL level and wow, he just suddenly came from nowhere and had a fantastic first year that I can't imagine anyone would have predicted. So look, it was really interesting seeing that first year, but then he just hasn't necessarily taken that next step. He needs to show a few more aspects to his game. Like, you've got, say, Adams where he can play forward of centre, Fullerton can as well. Darcy needs to show a few more of those things, but in terms of a competitive ruckman, look, Darcy sort of brings that to the table. So there's sort of some of the advantages you get there. But yeah, I would like to see that consistent and strong rate of improvement to be able to justify having him higher. McInerney, look, he was drafted as a mature ager, so he is those few years older, but again, he's another good ruckman, established himself last year. He's a solid piece for Brisbane without being a star ruckman, so like his game, and I'd be comfortable having him. Jake Riccardi, so I think he was quietly one of the steals from the 2019 draft. Presented really strong value, and he's one of those year-on-year improvers that I talk about quite often. So in his draft year, he wasn't anything in his draft year, came back as an overager, showed really quite a number of promising signs in the TAC Cup or NAB League at that time, and then jumped forward to the VFL the next year and won the basically Rising Star Award there and really had a breakout year and really took huge steps. And then with GWS again last year, took further strides and really looked good at AFL levels. So with the Riccardi, look, seeing that upward trajectory, seeing the way he attacks the ball aerially, look, I think there's something to build with there. He can keep building more aspects into his game, a few more points of difference. If he did that, he could possibly jump higher in this list. But at this time, look, he's someone where I'd be very comfortable having him as a key forward. And I like roughly where he's listed on this list. So moving down this list, so Reef McGuinness. So for me, he's probably someone we don't necessarily see this year for Collingwood, but being that sort of, I guess, tall utility, I think is more someone, give him 2 or 3 years to develop, then I think he can start to become a factor. So someone where he's got the tools, he's a late bloomer, he's really grown quite considerably over the last few years. So there's a lot to like. He really hasn't necessarily had all the midfield opportunities for Oakley. Last year, there wasn't that sort of, I guess, year to develop. So give him time. But he's played forward, back, midfield. I think he's going to be a good midfielder. He'll just need to keep developing that contested side to his game. But there's a lot of tools there. He's got the fantastic athleticism, so it'll be interesting to see how he develops and if he can become as good as we hope that he can at this stage. Tanner Bruin, look, I could, again, with a lot of these guys, put them in any order, and really this whole group here from last year's draft I could put in any order. With a Bruin, look, I like him whether he's in the midfield, forward, look, he's a goal-kicking midfielder, good skills, wins his own ball, strong contested side to his game. So, there's a lot there to like. You've got McRae. He's more advanced than his brother at the same age, but has the same sorts of tricks. Shorter, but I think he'll be terrific for a long time. Could argue he goes higher. He's really got the ceiling to really push considerably up this list. So maybe in future revisions of last year's draft, maybe he's someone that really zooms up quite considerably. But we'll have to see how that goes. But I'm hopeful that we can see him over the next few weeks because Collingwood frankly really need him because their midfield's looking pretty thin at this stage outside of those top sort of 3 midfielders or top 3 or 4. Heath Chapman, It sounds like Fremantle, they're going to try and make him into that David Mundy style midfielder, but in years past, well, he's been that sort of, I guess, tall defender. Intercepts well, good ball user, can provide some run. You can either use him as a key or sort of a medium tall. Stylistically, he's more that Birchall medium tall who just sort of generates drive, intercepts from defence. So, I like his game quite a lot. Sam Berry, really good, really competitive midfielder, strong ball winner, strong tackler. You could push him forward if you want. I really like his game. And same with the Tom Powell. So, high level accumulator, strong contested ball winner. Good piece for North Melbourne also. I think they'll be happy with him for a long time. And with these guys, they're all pretty immediate players. So I think we should really be seeing quite a lot of each of them this year. Or at least I'm hoping, because they're all ready to go. Zerha, good piece for North Melbourne. Whether it is forward, you could even push him through the midfield. It gives you options, but good player, deserves to be on the list. Rowbottom, didn't necessarily see this coming in his draft year, but he's certainly proved it at AFL level. Just really strong contested ball winner, has a burst of speed, skills decent. So, I think it's just a really good midfielder, and again, deserving. Some might say maybe a Rowbottom should be higher. Maybe he should. We'll have to see how he develops over the next few years. See if he can become one of those elite midfielders, but certainly I think he's a good midfielder nonetheless. Bailey Fritsch, I like him forward. He can play back as well, but he's someone where I think he's probably one of those underrated forwards where hits the scoreboard like mad. I just like him. He's a good piece I'd be very comfortable having. Quaynor, like him in defence. Wins his one-on-ones, but he can provide some drive as well. So whenever you've got guys that do that, they're assets. You've got Parfitt, competitive midfielder, strong tackler, provides a lot of pressure and energy around the contest. So they're the positives. Skills leave something to be desired. So given that, I don't have him higher, but is one where possibly I could have him a little higher. Maybe still probably outside that top 50, but maybe edging near that range. But he's been around a bit longer, so that's something to keep in mind. Zach Bailey, like him for Brisbane, looks very lively up forward. So deserves to be on the list. I think there's quite a bit there. And Zach Fisher. So with any of these guys, I could have them in any order, and I could even have them higher. But Fisher, lively forward, can even push through the midfield. I think with a Bailey, with a Fisher, they're both making steps in their games. So I can justify having them here. But and then a Jack Martin. So look, maybe I'm cheating having a preseason draft pick in here, but nonetheless, I still consider that part of the draft process. So, I've included him here for Carlton, but and look, he's someone where he hasn't necessarily lived up to his full potential. What he was looking like as a junior was someone where I was projecting him to be something like a circa 2010, 2011 style Dale Thomas almost, where he just played with that energy, provided that tackling, really that aerial athlete who could take a hanger. So really did all those, I guess, prime Dale Thomas sort of things, but we haven't necessarily seen him quite develop into that player. So, and I was hoping maybe for Carlton, maybe he would, but he hasn't shown quite those signs, but obviously he's a really good player wherever he's used, but gives you versatility, great athlete, he's a good piece. So, Jaden Stevenson, look, he had a shocker for Collingwood last year. And he was someone where he was only really for the opening minutes of the first quarter, having an impact, kicking a goal, and then he'd just really go quiet from there. But I do think Collingwood did give up on him too early. And I've said it many times, and I'll say it again. But great first round, firstly, for North Melbourne, and is someone where, even as a junior, the things that he was doing for North Melbourne, he actually did as a junior, which a lot of people might not be aware of. So playing on a wing through the midfield, he could do those things then. He was actually an elite endurance athlete. He's still obviously a very high level endurance athlete, so it's no surprise seeing him to be able to go up the field. And he's even played inside midfield and proven he can win his own contested balls. So, what he was doing for Collingwood last year, look, I think just, I guess, being in the hub, it just probably didn't suit him, and I think that's probably where the troubles came from there. I think he's much better than the player he was looking like for Collingwood last year, and I think he's more like what he really did in his first few years. But then on top of that, he's got the scope to play more up the field for North Melbourne. So, given his last his performance last year. Maybe I'm being a touch conservative with this evaluation, having him at 80, but I think probably as the year progresses, I think he could maybe move up even to sort of the 50 range on this list, thereabouts. So, I've still got strong respect for Stevenson's game, and I would be very comfortable having him on my list, it's fair to say. Taron Thomas, look, is a good piece, and you can actually play him anywhere. This is one of the unique things with Thomas. So, as a sort of 15, 16-year-old, you'd have him for Tasmania, running off half-back, generating drive off there. So you had those components. You can have him forward. You could possibly even use him through the midfield in the future. So it just gives you options. But good footballer, maybe offensively could do a bit more. I like sort of the defensive side of his game more so. But yeah, once he sort of gets that offensive side, finds and wins more of his own ball, I think he can move up this list possibly. But for now, I like him where he is. Petreski-Steeden, look, he can provide some drive, provides run, good skills. It is a good piece, so yeah, I like him where he is. Jordan Clark, I think is really a breakout candidate for this year. Looked great during the Amy match, so we'll have to see if he can just keep building upon that. But certainly all the run and drive he can generate, I think he's really going to be someone who can be an impact player for Geelong and really open up some games and really provide a lot of that run that they need for, I guess, the way football's looking like it's going to go. Michael Frederick, again, possibly one maybe I'm getting sucked into with his Amy performance, but I really liked him. Wing, he could play forward if you want. Really can break the lines like mad, but then he can also hit the scoreboard. So he wasn't necessarily before this year great, but he's someone where it looks like he's really got that growth trajectory of improvement. So maybe I'm taking a chance here with Frederick, but yeah, I really like his game. And Liam Henry, he's someone where I see him as sort of, for me, a high conviction forward. So sort of that athletic marking forward, create separation on the lead. There's a lot to like. I don't necessarily see him becoming a midfielder, but I think he's just going to be a good general forward for a long time. And I think he'll become a regular this year for Fremantle. So yeah, I think he's a good piece that is just really waiting to be unlocked. Tom Atkins, again, maybe a speculative pick based on his Amy match. But round one, look, he did enough to sort of support my thinking, where he'll win his one-on-ones, wins his own ball, but can generate some drive too from defence. So, in his new role, I really like Atkins. If he's as a midfielder or a forward, I'm not seeing it necessarily, but in defence, I think we've really found his spot there, and I think he can be a real asset. Cameron Rayner, hard to place given his recent injury. So if not for the injury, maybe I'm talking about him in the top 50 even, possibly. So this year was set to be possibly a breakout year. I think he would have shown at minimum at least incremental improvement. And I thought he would have been more of an impactful forward, play through the midfield more, win first possession more, be more of a factor out of there. So we'll just have to see ultimately how he comes back. But I'm still assuming on return, look, he might take a year to get back into gear, but with that said, I think he can still be a very good footballer at AFL level, both forward and midfield for that matter. So it's a wait and see. I don't think he's ever going to be that Dusty or Petrarca level player. Hasn't necessarily had the numbers at the same stages to show that he can be that, but I think he can still be a very good footballer in his own right. So I do give him that sort of credit there. And then we've got Jack Carroll. So he's someone where I thought he dropped in last year's draft further than he should have. And I think he's just going to be a really good midfielder for a long time. So as a junior, tracking his story, so he was playing really sort of defence outside, had the skills, had the evasion, had some tricks. But last year he really developed a very strong contested side to his game. Won a high percentage contested, proved that he can be a really good inside midfielder. So showing that rate of improvement, being that December birthday, I think there's considerable upside with a Carroll. So I think Carlton really have one there to track for a number of years going forward. So a name that maybe most fans won't be aware of yet, but I think we'll become aware of in the future. Braden Cook, look, I think is a good forward. Not sure necessarily how soon he breaks in for Adelaide, but he's someone where he's a bit of a late bloomer. showed an incredible rate of improvement last year, so he's someone I'm betting on based on his growth trajectory. So averaged 2 goals a game in the SA under-18s last year, but you've got some positional versatility there. He can be a forward, he can be a running wing, he can play half-back if you want him to, so he gives you options. But so we'll see what comes of him. And Brody Myercheck, look, hard to place, mature age forward, but obviously a very good one you'd want on your team. Depends on how safe you want to play it and what your level of conviction is with a lot of these younger guys. So maybe if I did a redo, perhaps I'd have him ahead of some of these more speculative guys. I only gave myself an hour for this task, so this isn't designed to be a perfect list. It's really here to give credit to a lot of the players that really should be here and deserve to be on the list, and that I think have scope to improve. And it's just at the end of the day about recognising talent, I think. That's the way I picture it, rather than necessarily sort of having to go at particular players. Sam Flanders, I think there's a great deal of scope to develop there. Both as a forward and as a mid, I think he can be a real weapon. In year one, look, he looked a bit stuck for the pace of AFL play, which was possibly a little surprising for me, but looking at him as a junior, he was every bit as good on the same team as Caleb Sarong. So I think it's just about giving him the opportunities, and I think once he gets that, I think he'll be a good footballer. So, and dual position, dual impact in both spots. So I'm playing at low risk by having him this low, but he's someone where he could really go up this list quite a lot and in a hurry. So Riley Collier-Dawkins, it's just about giving him that opportunity for Richmond. He hasn't had that yet, but seeing his talent against AFL talent in the Amy match, well, I'm pretty confident on him, honestly. Just looks really lively every time he's around it. And as that sort of taller midfield, he just has that mix of attributes that I'm looking for, where he can win his own ball, good athlete, has the skills, can hit the scoreboard. So there's just enough there where I'm thinking, look, he should be right. It's just we need to start seeing him get opportunities. It's not necessarily someone I'd want as a number 1 or number 2 midfielder, but if you've got him as that 3rd or 4th midfielder on your team, I think you'll do pretty well, ultimately. Devon Robertson, look, it's been a shame that we haven't really seen him more than once. We saw him in round 1 last year. Haven't seen him since for Brisbane. I was hoping after that Cam Rayner injury, maybe we'd see him in round 1. That got me momentarily a little bit excited in thinking about that possibility. So it'll just be a wait and see. But here's someone where he won the under-18 championships best and fairest ahead of the likes of Matt Rowell, Noah Anderson, Caleb Sarong. So we're talking about a legit footballer who has the production and performances behind him. Robertson, look, it's just giving him opportunities. I'd like to see that happen for Brisbane, but it's a wait and see ultimately. But high production, high volume contested, but he's really a pure inside player. Maybe you can play him a little bit outside, but he's not that dual position player like a lot of others are. So that's the one thing to be mindful of there. Brody Kemp, look, he's a tall utility. You can play him anywhere. High impact per possession. You can play him, whether it's midfield, you can play him key forward, key back. You can play him on a flank at either end if you want. So it really gives you a lot of options, but good athlete at that height, pretty good skills. He's someone where I've noticed in key moments he really comes up clutch. So, just an interesting player, but we'll have to wait to see what he looks like at AFL level and sort of, I guess, what happens there. Pal Pepper came good last year. He's really been a consistent good player from year 1 ultimately. Maybe hasn't taken those steps, and it's a case of really, he's another of those where he's been really physically developed from day 1. So it's sort of in some respects hard to develop him all that much further. But he's a competitor, good footballer. I like his game. So we'll have to see where he ends up on this list. But he's one of those where you can sort of pretty consistently say, look, this is roughly where he is. Whereas a lot of others, they've got more of that upside to keep improving. So, it's more guys will be moving around him more than anything, I would think. Archie Perkins, look, is a good forward, is a good mid. I would really like to see him in defence. I think that could be where you could possibly unlock his game most, where he's someone where he really wants to move the ball on. That's his natural inclination, where he'll run and carry with the ball, provide drive by foot. They're the sort of things you look for with the Perkins that are intriguing. Really strong mark, strong one-on-one. So, there's a lot of things there that scream to me that Perkins can be really good in defence. But again, he's a good forward. He can take a mark, hit the scoreboard. Skill's good, so he can hit some inside 50 targets here and there. He can play through the mids, win his own ball, do a bit there. But yeah, for me, probably defence would be where he gets unlocked. But I think we'll see a bit of him this year, and he'll be reasonable. But yeah, I can't necessarily justify having him any higher at this stage. Jeffrey, it'll be interesting to see where he settles. He can play forward, back, just someone where both on the lead he creates separation is a factor, but then aerially he's really sort of good, I guess you could say. He's almost that Jamara-esque aerially, but a bit shorter. So it's around that 190-ish mark. So that sort of tall to medium type. But yeah, I think he's probably about 192, I'd say. But yeah, look, he's that tallish type anyway. But yeah, forward or back, aerially he can really hurt you. I like him most in defence because he can be that, I guess, intercept marking factor. But then he can also take on the game a little bit as well instinctively. So he'll generate a bit of run there too, and I think he'll take on a few men on the mark. But then also as a forward he could be doing the same as well and hurting you. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where Gold Coast play him, but I wouldn't mind seeing a taste of him this year. I think he's someone where he's a really considerable talent and someone the Sun should be really excited about. Bergman, maybe it's a bit speculative having him even on the list at this stage. He's only played one game. His Amy match was good, round one match, pretty meh, but yeah, look, we'll just have to wait and see how he develops over the years. I think if you have him playing off halfback, he'll be a good interceptor. He'll provide some drive, create some run, decent kicks. So yeah, I think that's probably the best way to use him. And then from there, Josh Dacos, look, is he a one-year wonder? Round one was ugly on his part. He was very quiet, had no impact. For me, he's just a pure outside player, struggles with the inside components, not all that strong in the contest. So I think he's probably been slightly overhyped in the last year, but with that said, obviously, if he can continue the way he played last year, he is easily on this list. So many would argue he should be quite a bit higher, but for now, this is where I'm placing him. With a Witherden, look, I could say Dacos and Witherden could be above a Bergman, maybe a few others, but yeah, with a Witherden, look, proven player, started his career really well. Maybe hasn't necessarily taken that next step from there, which is probably, I guess, one of the critiques. But and then also he doesn't really have a contested side to his game either. But look, good interceptor. He can do damage with ball in hand, but he is a high risk player. But yeah, suits the West Coast style of game. I think he'll fit in there pretty well. And once Hearn retires, I think he'll take on more of a prominent role in that team. So yeah, again, another I think pretty highly of, and I think is a good piece. So what I've got here is a team by team breakdown. So in terms of, I guess, the team with the most young talent, well, for me, that turned out to be Gold Coast, and by quite a considerable margin. So having 7 guys in what I consider to be the top 50, and then 10 inside the top 100, well, that's phenomenal. So yeah, clear standouts there, and they've got a really strong young core of really high-end talent. So given they've got that, it's really just a case of putting good talent around them and really, I guess, avoiding bringing in, I guess, dud depth types that don't necessarily project as those clear, decisive best 22 players, because that's where Gold Coast have been caught out in the past, really just wasting a lot of list opportunities and list positions that they could have used a bit more wisely, I would have thought. So that's the interesting one there. Other interesting numbers that stand out immediately to me, so Collingwood with no top 50 players, so the only team in that category. And why is that the case? So with Collingwood, the big thing for them has been they've been trading a lot of those early picks over time. So and when they've had them, well, they took Stevenson, who he won the Rising Star, so he wasn't necessarily a failed pick, but it was more a case of, well, a few years on, well, in last off-season he was traded away for really nothing. So yeah, they lost that. They've had a few father-son and next-gen academy picks, so they've traded away a lot of picks, brought those guys in. So and then otherwise they've traded for rival talent. So whether it's Treloar bringing Dane Beams back, neither of those have necessarily turned out quite how Collingwood expected. But with those sorts of stories, well, that's really taken away Collingwood's opportunity, I suppose, to really add those top 50 in, I guess, this period of years sort of quality, I suppose, to put it that way. So, yeah, that's why Collingwood have no participants inside that top 50. And then if you look at the totals, so the one team with the most worrying total here is Melbourne. So, although they do have quite a bit of talent in, I guess, the age groups just outside of this, where you've got the likes of Oliver, Petrarca. So it's not that Melbourne necessarily don't have young talent, but it's more in this, I guess, group of years they don't have any. So I guess you could say that's the worrying sign for Melbourne there. So yeah, their young core is probably overall the most, I guess, concerning of them all, and really suggests that, I guess, there isn't necessarily the internal upside for growth on Melbourne's list that maybe a lot of people might be assuming. So yeah, so it'll be interesting to see if any or much of their young talent can really break through to help, I guess, the more established players really sort of take that next step. So that'll be an interesting watch. Hawthorn, look, that's not a particularly strong position to be in either, with one top 50 player and 3 in that top 100. So and with Hawthorn, look, they do have quite a bit of young talent coming through, and a lot who I think this year established themselves, if they're not already, as, I guess, your best 22 players. But the reason why they have, I guess, a lack of representation in the top 100 is at this point there's just a lack of star power. So that's something that really, I guess, in terms of that young star power, Hawthorn are going to need to find quite a lot more of that. Otherwise, they're going to be really struggling for quite a number of years, potentially. As well coached and well managed as that group is, for that matter, and how good their culture is. And then Adelaide is really another concerning team here too. So you've got 1 in the top 50, 3 in the top 100. Not great considering they're a rebuilding team really starting from basic. What the credit I can give an Adelaide is from last year's draft. I think they actually did very well overall. Look, I would have taken a Logan McDonald with their first pick, and I still... Obviously, with the draft, I'm always going to be picking, at the vast majority of spots, different players to who teams might necessarily prefer at spots. But to Adelaide's credit, what I can say is that they did have a really consistent, strong draft, where in going through selection by selection, there wasn't anyone that sort of made me think that guy's a dud, that guy's a dud. I thought really consistently they've got a lot of players who can be best 22 players out of last year's draft. So at least for me, in terms of building that young core group, that's a step in the right direction for me. So that's the promising sign for Adelaide, but it might be a slow build potentially. Although their game against Geelong, well, that was a good sign, and that as was their finish to last year. So maybe they'll improve quickly and not be such a bad team this year, but I do worry about their young core because there's quite a lot more growth that's needed there. And prior to last year's draft, I feel like there was a lot of wasted picks. So one year that stands out in particular is 2018, where you had the likes of Jones, so Chase Jones at pick 9, and then they also had Ned McHenry at pick 16. So look, given the guys that were available around those picks, I just think it was a missed opportunity ultimately for Adelaide. So and I was saying this around this time last year, but in that top 20, I would probably be saying a Chase Jones and Ned McHenry. They might even be those bottom 2 guys out of that group, I suppose you could say, that I'd be wanting. So, yeah, I do think that was a real missed opportunity there. And then here I've got a next 15. So, Luke Pedlar, look, I think he'll be a good pick for Adelaide from last year's draft, and I think he's really an impact player both through the midfield and forward. So highly aggressive, there's a lot that I like there. So Will Powell, I think he'll improve quite a lot for Gold Coast this year. Watching his Amy game in particular, I just think he's really ready to break out this year. So he's got the speed, provides the run, but he has sort of a better feel in terms of when to peel off an intercept now, I feel like. So I think this year is the year he really comes good. Speculative pick here in Errol Goulden. So, look, his practice match, Amy match, round 1, fantastic. I can't fault it. He really needs to be in the conversation. So, here he is joining the conversation. So for me, I guess I've still got reservations in that he's a shorter type. Not sure how much he improves, but look, if he keeps playing the way he's playing, he doesn't really need to improve all that much. He looks pretty good to me. So yeah, look, and with the way the game is evolving as well, I think that favours he and similar types as well. So yeah, I think there's definitely a place for him in the talks here. Jack Higgins, I think he really sort of, I guess, comes good for St Kilda this year. So obviously crossing from Richmond, and I think he's going to take that next step in his development. So yeah, we'll mostly play across half forward, push up onto a wing. It's going to be hard to get those inside minutes, I think, this year with St Kilda's midfield really being added to, with Clark to play through them or Crouch being added. So we'll have to wait and see there. But yeah, I do think Higgins will be, I guess, a much more productive player this year, and I think he's going to take a few more steps. You've got Scrimshaw, so good interceptor, good rebounder, ball use excellence. So yeah, deserves to be in the conversation at the very least. From there, Jack Graham, good midfielder, can play forward. Just very aggressive, strong tackler, has the contested side down. He's just a good team player, ultimately. He's a good component to a team. So, like his game, have respect for him, deserves to be in the conversation. Lachie Scholl showed good signs in round one. Good ball user, good on the outside, good off half back. He gives you those sorts of options. Doesn't have that contested side to his game at all. But with the way the game's evolving, look, that's more than okay. And I think, as I predicted in my Rising Star video, I think he's probably going to be top 5 pretty comfortably in the Rising Star, would be my thinking, most likely. So, yeah, like his game, he's solid. He's a solid get who many would argue should really be on this list, and I'm sure Adelaide fans will be saying that. But for me, he's more in the conversation than clearly in. Nick Hind looks good for Essendon running off half-back, good round one, good pre-season match, good in the Amies. So, yeah, I think he's going to be, I guess, better than I was initially expecting for Essendon, and I think he'll be a piece. So, credit where it's due there. Chad Warner, I think, is a piece for Sydney. Very strong contested ball winner, strong tackler, very competitive, but can play forward as well. So, I think this year he probably establishes himself as a best 22 player, and just, I guess, having that contested side on the level that he does, I think is a high probability of career type, and we'll have to see how good he becomes. But yeah, I don't have him necessarily far off the conversation, but probably not quite top 100 necessarily. Brennan Cox showed signs for Fremantle last year as a key defender, established himself. It's pretty clear that that's his best position. So, yeah, look, being a key position player, it elevates his value, and he could easily be higher on this list. If I spent more time going through it, maybe he would be quite a fair way into the top 100, but I didn't really get that time necessarily to really take my time on this list. So, but like his game, as long as he stays back, I think he's going to keep improving and be a good piece for a long time. Tom De Koning, unfortunately he's gotten hurt, so we'll miss him for the first part of the season. I'm not sure how long he's out for, but with him, look, I didn't necessarily always love him as a junior. Initially, as an underage, I like the signs he showed, looked like a good forward. In his draft year, didn't necessarily show the improvement that I liked, just dropped too many marks. I just found him really frustrating to watch. But being a tall, good at ground level, moved pretty well. They're the sort of things that you were sort of, at the time, sort of holding on to and hoping for. But what he has done is, he's someone where he's an improver, where he's kept growing, so I guess he's got that upside in that respect. But then also moving into the ruck, he's just looked a little bit better through there. So still needs to keep getting stronger, still needs to develop maybe a bit more hunger perhaps. But yeah, look, there's enough signs there to suggest he's developable, and I think he'll eventually become Carlton's number 1 ruckman. So, but yeah, I think he'll keep improving. So that's the key, and that's sort of what you're looking for. Lloyd Meek, he looks pretty competitive to me for Fremantle through the ruck. Could he surpass a Sean Darcy? I'm not going to put it past him if Darcy doesn't keep improving. So, yeah, look, he could potentially break onto this list in time, but probably doesn't look like he's done enough yet to be there, obviously. But, yeah, with ruckman, look, they come good around the age of sort of 24, 25. So, give him a few more years, and you never say never. Jack Payne, I think he establishes himself for Brisbane in defence this year. Good interceptor, can beat his opponent a little bit one-on-one, so he's a solid piece. So, yeah, pretty comfortable having him on the list there, and I think he could move into that top 100 by the end of the year possibly. So Dylan Stephens, I like him on the outside. It seems like he's been squeezed out of Sydney's best 22. I'd like to see him earn his way back in to give him that top 100 consideration at this point. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he can squeeze back in this year, or if so, then when. And then Ben Ainsworth. So he has his fans. Ultimately, he's another of those smalls where he hasn't really improved since his junior play, honestly, which has been a bit disappointing. But look, he can play forward, he can play midfield, so at least you've got the dual position. Good athlete, has a lot of attributes, but just hasn't really converted it as much. Last year was probably the 1 year where I saw enough growth in him where I thought, look, he's an AFL footballer and is a decent one at that, but yeah, he's no star, and I can't justify having him higher. So these are the next 15, and then you can see the breakdown as well. So Adelaide, you've got +2s, so it's not necessarily all doom and gloom for Adelaide. There are some pieces that are starting to form, but obviously they'll be needing more top-end talent will be the key over time. But yeah, if Adelaide have a few more early picks, then maybe that's possible. Brisbane, Carlton, Essendon, Freo 2, Gold Coast 2, so just adding to that war chest of really exceptional players ultimately. Hawthorn, Richmond, St Kilda, Sydney with 3. So yeah, it's a good position with Sydney as well, having those extra players there. Thanks guys for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a like, subscribe and hit the notification bell for future updates, and in the comments section below, let me know, in this series of drafts, is there anyone that I left out of my list that perhaps I should have included? Is there anyone I overlooked? Because I was in a bit of a hurry, so just getting all the names in, so perhaps there is. Or and which guys would you have higher and lower than I had? Even going through the list then myself, given the time limit obviously, there were quite a number of things that even I consider to be imperfections on my own lists. So it's by no means designed to be perfect, and really a test of, I guess, what I could do in that set 1 hour period. So that was just sort of part of, I guess, the challenge, being a 1 hour challenge. So yeah, I had a bit of fun with that. But yeah, and yeah, if you're looking forward to some of my draft content, my, I guess, next article for ESPN is up tomorrow. So I'll be going through pretty much, I guess, some of the big questions in the lead up to this year's draft. So make sure you check out espn.com.au/AFL, and you should see it sometime tomorrow. So anyway, thanks guys, and see you in the next video.